And I'm going to talk about serverless capabilities in CloudGuard. With the Protego acquisition, we enhanced the capabilities around serverless security. Um, what we do now, what we can do today in CloudGuard, we can automate security for serverless applications with a code-centric approach from development to the runtime, which enables your customers to have the best security at the cloud speed. The value that we give is divided into two parts: the code scanning, which happens in the CI/CD phase, where we look for least privileges for each Lambda function, and we scan for vulnerable dependencies in the packages that the Lambda is using, and the runtime protection, which basically wraps the Lambda function at runtime, gives your customers the ability to detect and stop application attacks, and also to automatically profile and enforce a function and application based on the behavior of these functions. Now let me show you how it works. So if we go to the CloudGuard portal and we go to the account view, we can see that we are able to enable serverless protection. Clicking on enabling serverless protection, we get an easy onboarding steps that we need to follow to see the posture management and runtime protection in the CloudGuard platform. I click the serverless button, and then I choose the function that I want to see or protect. When doing that, I can see a lot of information on this function. So I will start with the information on the runtime. So here you can see that this function is protected with our FSP, which is function self-protect, meaning that it is protected in runtime. The auto protect toggle allows you to automatically add the FSP to the function, as well as new versions which you are going to release. Block on detect means that if we detect something, we will block it or prevent the attack, or we can toggle it to do alerts only. The risk shows you the blast radius of the function. So if this function has a lot of APIs and it's exposing a lot of and accessing a lot of data, then the risk will be high. And then the posture shows you the level of security that you apply for this specific function. In addition to this, you can see in this page what we have learned in runtime on this specific function. You can see that the processes that are running are ls and cat. We see the file that this function is accessing and the API and network activity that the function is doing. This is really important to understand that the analysis of the APIs that are being used is done in two phases. The first phase is in the posture management phase, which we call here code analysis. So you see that, for example, I learned that this API is used and this API is used through the code analysis. And then if I apply runtime protection, I can verify it during runtime. So here we can see that this API was learned through the runtime as well as the code analysis. In some cases, there are behaviors that we didn't learn, that we made a mistake, that the algorithm is imperfect, and we allow users to add exclusions. So a user can create a new exclusion, say that I need file access, and then I'm adding file access, and the pattern for the file is /dev null. And now I'm adding the ability for the function to access dev null without getting any alert or prevent this specific access. The next tab that we have here is network security policies. Here we take the VPC security settings and we just visualize it for the user. He will have all the information regarding this function in a single pane of glass. So here you can see I don't have any network policy. IAM policies shows us the IAM or the permissions that this function has. So we can see here that although it is using a subset of the DynamoDB APIs, it is allowed to do all the operations on DynamoDB, which is not very good, and we will see how we protect against this bad use case. Event activity and traffic activity are related to logic. So here we show the event and traffic activities related to this function that we take from logic. The entity viewer shows us the way that the entity looks at the Dom9 platform. So we are able to understand how we compose this Lambda and what kind of GSL queries we can create on this Lambda. The properties shows you the properties on the AWS account, and the recommendation shows you the recommendations to increase the posture for this specific function. The last thing that I want to show you is the alerts and findings. So in the alert and findings, I have 3 levels of alerts. One are all the alerts that are coming from the compliance engines. The second is the logs and alerts that comes from logic and are related to this function. And the third one is the serverless specific alerts. And here it is divided to runtime. So here, for example, someone was trying to attack the function in runtime by doing a code injection. So I can see all the information here on the code injection and what was the type of code injection that the user tried to do in runtime. And I have other alerts like this one, which is done on the posture management part, which shows me what kind of CVEs exist in the dependencies or in the code that the Lambda is using. So for example, here, there is a vulnerability in the MSSQL that the function is actually using. One of the most interesting alerts that we generate is the permissive role alert. So here you can see that while analyzing this function, I found out that the actual permissions that the Lambda function has and the actual APIs that it is using are not the same. And in order to reduce the risk, I'm offering the user to take my recommendation and copy it from this alert into their AWS account and apply it there. Basically, what we're doing here is we're limiting the permissions, for example, here on the S3, not to allow everything, but allow just the put object which is used for this function. This is something which is very, very valuable, and we are the only vendor that offers an actionable recommendation instead of just sending the security persona for a wild goose chase with the development teams to try and find out what is the difference between the permissions that the function has and what it is actually using. So this is very, very useful and saves a lot of time. So if we go to the CloudGuard portal and we go to the account view, we can see that we are able to enable serverless protection. Clicking on enabling serverless protection, we get an easy onboarding steps that we need to follow. And while after doing that, we will be able to see our Lambda functions under the serverless part with the capabilities that I mentioned before. So logging into a function, we can see that we can see the information and the security that we added to this function.